All right, so here we are again with my story part 3. So, for the first several months of all this, it really felt like I was living a soap opera or a Hallmark movie. I used to tease my coworkers that I was the days of their lives because it seemed like every day there was some other major drama or something. And I don't know if maybe that's part of it, but I really wanted everything to wrap up neat, nice and neat. And I really was holding that hope alive for several months. But it's not a fictional story, it's real life. And things don't always work out the way that we would like, and they don't always tie up as neatly as we would hope for. And that's definitely what happened in my case. So, there were two different court things going on. There was the criminal court for the bigamy, and with that, really all I wanted was for him to be convicted of the bigamy so that that would be on his record. I knew that he wouldn't really be serving time or any of that, and I didn't really care. I just wanted that on his record. And it didn't happen. So even though the bigamy was a felony, they ended up granting him what's called a diversion. And a diversion is something that's given in certain states when you have a first offender and of a nonviolent crime. And basically the terms of the diversion were that he had to do 3 things by the end of a year. He had to write me an apology letter. He had to perform some community service, and he had to complete some substance abuse counseling. And if he did those things at the end of the year, his record would be clean. There'd be no record of anything. Well, the funny thing is, he never did those things. So, but he still kind of got away. So there's actually a warrant out for his arrest, but it's in another state, and they're not exactly going to go hunt him down. And I've got to admit, I don't even want my tax dollars going to go find a bigamist. There's better things to spend that money on. But basically, unless he gets pulled over or his record run for whatever reason, that's kind of a done deal, I guess. And then the other court thing was civil court with the divorce. And it's crazy. So originally I was doing divorce by publication, just putting it in the newspaper. But then once we found him and found this out, was approaching things, a little bit differently. What was so shocking, though, is that he went on the offensive. Not sure how he thought he could get away with that, but he tried. And so court ended up being a lot more difficult than I expected. Entertaining at certain points. Things like the judge turned to my husband's attorney and asked if he was psycho, and all his attorney could do was shrug his shoulders. There were certainly some humorous moments in there. But basically, it also amounted to nothing. After a whole bunch of back and forth and me producing documents and him failing to produce documents and so on and so forth, the decree was written largely in my favor. Never asked for alimony or anything like that. All I wanted was to not face the consequences of his choices. So I asked for him to pay back some of the money I had spent covering my attorney, pay for taxes. I was paying for his health insurance. I asked for those monies back. Also wanted him to take on the debt that was his. And then the shocking one is he refused to try to sell the house when we were in negotiations. And but then all of a sudden in court he wanted it. Didn't quite work out the way I hoped there. So he got the house, which was fine. But then he never paid on it, which was not okay. So anyways, long story short, the decree was written just fine. But what I didn't understand was that to enforce the decree, I would basically have to take him back to court for every little thing that he failed to do, which was everything. And by the time that was done, I had no money. He'd already taken everything I had, and I spent the majority of my paycheck that first year on attorneys. And I had no money, and I had no desire to keep that conflict alive. So made the hard decision to just walk away from it, cut my losses, and let it go. So it was tough. It was not the ending I wanted. If I was writing a fictional account of this, he would absolutely face consequences, and we would all get to watch. But that's not what happens. I really have just moved on from where he is and what he's doing. I chose not to continue to figure out where he is or anything else. In fact, the only way I knew about the warrant for his arrest was from Jeff Probst, because they found that when they did their research. And at this point, he is where he is, and I really don't care. So, moving on to some of the happier stuff. Life now is amazing. It's one of those, if you'd asked me before if I was happy, I would have absolutely said I was. But I am happier now than I've ever been. And after going through what I've been through, I appreciate it more than I ever would have before. And, I wouldn't wish that kind of experience on anybody, but what I want to show you is that you can go through it and not just be okay, but be great. So, just some information, I guess, on where I am now. So I started dating, actually before the divorce was even final. I know it's not recommended, but, hey, sometimes we do things that maybe we shouldn't. So I started dating, really just to learn how to date, because since my ex and I had been together since we were 16, I literally had never dated a man, which sounds funny, but I hadn't. I'd only dated boys. So I needed to get some experience. And my plan the whole time was actually to move out to Seattle at the end of the school year. And so I wanted to do some practice dating, I guess, in Atlanta, just to kind of get the hang of it, figure out what I was looking for before I went to Seattle to do the real thing. Well, life doesn't usually turn out the way we expect. So one of my actually pretty early practice dates is now my husband, as it happens, It was interesting. So there wasn't like a big spark or anything on the first date. There were things that intrigued us about the other, but there were also things that were kind of like, yeah, maybe not. And a few weeks later, we went on a second date to a Super Bowl party at a friend of his. And he'll never let me live this down. He tried to kiss me that night, and I turned my cheek. But then he adopted a puppy a few weeks later. That would be Tiger. And he sent me this picture of Tiger in this little tiny body, and his head is just as big as it is now. And it was the cutest thing I'd ever seen. And so I had to see the dog. So we scheduled a third date more so I could see the dog than anything else. But that was actually the first night that Brock and I connected. And the way it ended up is really funny. So that was right before my spring break. And on my spring break, I was planning to go to Seattle to look for work. And as it happened, I still went to Seattle. But instead of job hunting in Seattle, I was sitting on my dad's couch job hunting in Atlanta. Because there was just enough there with Brock that I was like, I'm going to give it a year. And so I found a job in Atlanta and made the commitment to stay here for a year and see what happened. And so glad I did. we took things slowly, which we both needed to. So, for me, obviously, I was still coming out of everything, and I was nowhere near healed. I was on the path to it, knew I wanted to be there, but I was not there yet. More than anything else, I still was holding on to a lot of anger, a lot of anger. And the problem with the financial infidelity is that it doesn't end. It's interesting when people ask me about the affair, that part really doesn't even bother me so much. Once I got a clean bill of health, I really kind of let that go. The part that's been the hardest, though, was the financial. And it's because I have to face it every single day. And that's been the hardest part. And that's the hardest part to let go the anger with. Working on it. But I still struggle with it. I'll be honest. Every time I, face something because of what he did to me financially, it's hard. It's hard because it's not fair. But it's my burden to bear. So, was still doing a lot of healing. So yeah, we took things slowly. And, people always ask how in the world we were able to trust again. And it was kind of a multi-step process. I guess part of it was first learning to trust Tiger. Because the thing is, dogs can't lie. And through Tiger, I could see what a good and consistent man Brock is. Part of it was through his friends. He has an amazing group of friends that I met very early on. And they'd been in his life for many years, and that told me quite a bit about his character. But ultimately, it comes down to trusting myself, and trusting myself in two ways. First, trusting that I'd recognize signs of something going wrong again, and also be able to distinguish that from just the noise from my past. But also trusting that I can make it through, and that's one of the things that going through something like this does is after going through this, I know I can survive anything. So it makes it a little bit easier, I guess, to trust again. But it hasn't always been easy. I won't lie. There's definitely been, roadblocks or times when my brain is screaming, danger, danger, and there's nothing. It's just my brain. But as I've written quite a bit about, you can retrain your thinking and retrain your thought processes. It is possible. I promise. So, yeah, it's been at this point 4+ years that we've been together. And it's amazing now because I've rebuilt most of what I've lost. Married again, have a home again. You can see my office behind me that is my sanctuary. My little meditation yoga nook over there. I have a dog again. I have a garden again, which feels so amazing. Have an unbelievable group of friends and family around me. And, I just remember 5 years ago when this happened. I remember saying, I am not just going to survive. I am going to thrive. And when I said those words, I had no idea how in the world I was going to do it. Everything was gone. But here I am, 5 years later, and happy to say I'm thriving. And you can too.